How's it going, YouTube? Atheist Chef here. Now, I just recently watched a video. Alex Botten did a debate with a presuppositionalist, presuppositionalist guy, Rob Hughes. I'm going to link down below what the whole debate. But I really wanted to get to the highlighted points, the points that are really, really interesting. Because this guy is another cyclone, but not the best cyclone. You know, of course, Psy is much better at this, but thankfully, being that this guy was, he's not that good at the Presup argument, Alex got to, I guess, have to dumb it down for him. A lot of his points, he had to dumb it down for him, which means I got to figure out what you're talking about, because when you hear two British people talking, they just sound smarter just when they open their mouths. So Alex is already smart, but then he's British, so like a lot of things go over my head because I'm American and that's just how we work. But thankfully, he had to repeat himself like 7 times, so it was able to sink into my thick skull. Now, the reason why I wanted to cover this is because there's a lot of cyclones out there, and many of them are dreadfully terrible, and Alex has had to put up with pretty much all of them, I think. And in there, so since they can't beat Alex Botten, they're going on to us lesser beings that don't really know these things. And many of these have never really heard these kind of responses, and they're hearing just a few minutes of Sci-10. They're kind of like G-Man. They hear a few phrases like, oh, I can remember this, I'll put this in the argument. Well, these things we're going to try and bring up tonight, I would have to say when it comes to the cyclones, or at least the noobs, you can shut them down really, really fast. As far as the nuances go of like the higher ranks of Presup people beyond Sci-10, well, I don't know because I don't ever mess with those. But these right here, these should be really your main talking points and main things to look out for. Early on in the debate, Rob Hughes, tells why he's a presuppositionalist. Basically, he says, should we use evidence, or do we just expose to the person, the atheist, that he is suppressing the truth? Now, can they explain how that we're suppressing the truth, what we're doing? No, they're not going to touch that. They're not going to try and figure it out, because, hey, you would think that if they were really trying to help us, they could explain how we're suppressing the truth, and so we could go, you're right, I am doing that. But no, they're leaving it up in the air because they really don't know, because they don't have an answer. Actually, I love a little bit later on, Alex says, are you an evidentialist or a presuppositionalist because, this is a better tactic, or because, well, you just don't have any evidence? Now, of course, Rob denies the lack of evidence, but really, we all know that the evidence, any argument for evidence is wearing mighty, mighty thin. So, yeah, there you go. One of the big creationist tools in their little tool belt is Romans 1:18 through 22. And I'm only going to read the first verse because y'all have probably heard it all way too much. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all the godlessness and wickedness of people who suppress their truth by their wickedness. Basically, the 18 through 22 says, yeah, everything was obvious. God, made it very clear from day one. You can see it in nature, and you can see it in all of his invisible qualities. So nobody has any excuses, and everybody knows God is real. But they're suppressing it with their wickedness. They're lying, or something to that effect. Well, again, how? How am I doing that? Why aren't you telling me how I can know that I'm doing it myself? I mean, am I lying to you when I say that I don't believe in God? Is every person that doesn't believe a liar? Or is it something that sin is doing and I don't know about it? Help me fix it. Help me change. But they won't. They don't know either. They don't even try. However, Alex Botten comes up with something very clever. And I call it clever because, well, it's more clever than the presuppositionalists are being, but something very obvious to everyone else. Verse 23, immediately afterwards, says, and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images made to look like mortal human beings and birds and animals. Now, what we know from the Bible is that Paul tended to write a lot of churches. He had written a lot of letters and to specific people in specific situations and telling them how to act. And there was, we saw the Romans and Galatians and Ephesians and Colossians and Philippians and all that good stuff. He always had a specific message in mind. And we see that in verse 23. Basically, he's saying, hey, you guys are kind of worshiping, you're making idols, like literal ones, and you got to stop doing that, okay? And thing is that's called context. And, normally when you get in a discussion with a Christian and they're like, oh, what's the context? What was the whole thing? What was the point he was trying to make? What was the scenario? What was going on? But you deal with presuppositionalists, and they just kind of ignore that. They just take part of the scripture that works for them and ignore the rest. So next time you're dealing with a presuppositionalist that brings up Romans 1:18, make sure to point up verse 23 in context. So about 13 minutes, 30 seconds in, Rob Hughes is getting his taint handed to him by Alex as he's just bulldogging scripture at him, and then so Rob Hughes has to stop and be like, well, hey, if you want, this is really close to a Bible study here. This is not a Bible study we're supposed to be having. We're supposed to be talking about presuppositionalism. Similar to that, Sci 10 and people like Bible Thumping Wingnut and people like him, they're not going to argue the Bible with you. Even Sci 10 says himself, he said, because of your different worldview, that you can't argue the Bible with him because you're on a different worldview, which is a ridiculous argument, by the way. But basically, they know they can't challenge a point. They can't answer your question, so they're going to try and dodge it. So, just long story short, it's a cop-out, period. Alright, so here's the part that I want everybody to focus on. So you're playing video games, you're masturbating to my face and voice. Well, I don't blame you because I am a sexy bitch and I got a really nice voice. I know I masturbate to it every once in a while. Can't help myself. I got a boner right now just talking on the webcam. Anyways, so this primacy of existence that Alex talks about it's an amazing argument. Basically, how it works is the presuppositionalists ask you, what's your foundation for knowledge? How do you account for your beliefs? What's your foundation? To the presuppositionalists, their foundation is God, the all-intelligent, omnipotent, all that, omnipresent, omniscient being of the universe. But you atheists don't have a foundation for your knowledge, according to your worldview. Now, what's great about the primacy of existence is what it means is I think, I'm thinking, therefore I know I exist. I can know that I exist because I'm thinking. Now, this serves as a great foundation. This is a very root. I can know for sure that without a God, without a deity, without appealing to a higher power or authority, I know that I exist. So now the presuppositionalist has a foundation, and now the atheist or anybody else has a foundation for their knowledge. An important thing to remember is the definition of knowledge in this kind of argument. Knowledge is going to be defined as a justified, true belief. So to make that step up to knowledge, the belief needs to be justified and it needs to be true, because it can be, they can be mutually exclusive. You may believe something and it can be justified to believe in it, but it may not be true. And you may believe something that's true, but you may not be justified in believing in it. So it needs to be both at the same time. So fortunately, the primacy of existence, which states, I think, therefore I exist, is a justified, true belief. Plain and simple, cannot be argued out. I think, therefore I exist, is a justified, true statement. That is why it is a foundation that we can use. Now, upon that foundation, we can build up on that. And we build up on that by using our reasoning and using our senses as tools and applying what we've learned from those senses, and that becomes, our reason, which then comes to logic. Now, presuppositionalists are going to reply, well, how do you know that your senses and your reasoning and logic are valid? Well, here's the first part, or first thing that you may need to know. The presuppositionalist knows that your logic is valid because according to their worldview, everybody gets it from God. So they're already aware of that. So what they're going to do is they're trying to trick you. They're trying to get you to, trick you into the fact that you can't justify or account for the reasoning, whatnot. But the fact is they already know this. They already know that it's valid. But they're trying, it's kind of a little bit of a word game there. So don't let them have that. Don't let them go there. Don't let them get away with that. Just point out that's your foundation, and that the reason why it's valid is because, well, you're not in a psych ward right now. You're not in prison. You have not got hit by cars by going across the street. And the most importantly, you're able to communicate with people logically, and you're able to hold a job and all these kind of different things. All these things we experience. The fact that you're alive and a normal human being and haven't killed yourself, fantastic argument for this. We couldn't do any of these things if our reasoning and our logic and our senses were not valid. And if you get a particularly dumb presup, which has been known to happen, and I've even seen Psi use this argument. So, well, how do you know? Like, for example, if you say, well, I know that I'm not in a psych ward, well, then they say, well, how do you know you're not in a psych ward? How can you know you're really talking to me? Same thing as I talked about before. It's a trick. The person, and you can bring this up, is you can say, well, am I? I'm talking to you. The presuppositionalist knows that you're not in a psych ward, but again, he's trying to attack your reasoning and your justification. So again, don't let him go there. Bring the question back on him. Just say, hey, look, you know I'm not in a psych ward. I'm talking to you right now. And you know that you're talking to me right now. So obviously I'm not. The presup may, try to say, well, how do you know that your senses are valid? I said, well, look, all my senses are independent from each other. Let's just say I've got a pie right here. Well, I'm holding the pie, so there's touch. And then I can see it. And then I can smell it. And then I can, I really can't hear it. And I can even taste the pie. So to me, I see a pie. But I see someone walking along the road. And I'm like, hey, is this a pie? And then they're like, yeah, why are you holding a pie in your bare hands? That's what the little sleeve thing is for. Oh, well, sorry, I was kind of hungry and, I like... And, yeah, so, yeah, they may look at you kind of weird, but you're freaking still correct. You have a pie in your hands. So, being as our senses are independent of each other and they all agree with each other, and then other people can see what we're seeing or hear, taste, or smell, or whatever, then we have, independent verification, and by that we develop a consensus. So we know that our senses are valid. All right, so about 2540, Rob Hughes asked Alex Botten, can you be wrong about everything you claim to know? Now, see, this is a sign of somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, because this question is refutable in so many ways. My personal favorite way to do this is to point out the simple fact is, if they're going to say, if you admit, yes, I could be wrong about everything that I know, then eventually they're going to get to the point of saying, well, you know that God exists. The whole scripture, Romans 1:18, well, you know that God exists. But of course, you can easily reply, oh, really? How is that so? Because I just admitted that I could be wrong about everything I know. If I can be wrong about everything I know, then how can I know that God exists? That's just one way. But how Alex does it is glorious. He just says, no. Now, if you go watch this video, you watch this, like I said, 25, 40 minutes in, when Alex says no, you can literally hear him fall off his script. You can literally hear that guy falling off the script so hard that I think he probably broke his leg. There was like 5 seconds of silence. And I guess only because somebody's mic moved. But literally, it was just, you could just hear afterwards the gears grinding of like, what the hell am I supposed to say? I don't know what to say. Nobody's ever said no to me before. It was fantastic, and I really think it's the best way. Because what Alex points out is this. There are certain things that we can know for sure. For example, I know that I exist. The basic primacy of existence. Since I know I exist, I know something that's independent of God or independent of an outside source. And so I cannot be wrong about everything I claim to know because I know this one thing for sure. Now, of course, people like Negation of P, Live Life 8072, a couple of others have brought up things like, well, I know that I'm not your God, I know I'm not omnipotent, and some other good things. But really, those are good ones too. But if you stick with the primacy of existence, you'll be just fine. So around 26 minutes in, Rob Hughes asked, well, what about, we don't know everything in the universe. What if, something, is there something that's in the universe that we don't know about that could disprove everything that you currently know? And Alex, once again, says no. Even if we don't know everything, even though that the universe is huge and so vastly undiscovered, what we may find will not contradict what is already considered knowledge, what is justified and true. Certain things such as, we're never going to find a square circle. There's going to be no such thing as a married bachelor. There's going to be things that are just impossible. They would have to defy logic to make a logical argument. This is another trick by the apologist. They're going to try and take what you don't know, the impossibility, or the things that we just can't say right now, and use it to question your belief. However, note this is a premise that they're not going to accept themselves. They're not going to say there's possibly something in the universe that proves that God doesn't exist. They're not going to accept that. So if they're not going to accept it, you shouldn't either. Eventually, Rob Hughes gets to the point of accusing it of being viciously circular. If you've dealt with presups before or heard videos, you're very well aware of this phrase, viciously circular. Basically them saying, well, what you're telling me now is that your reasoning is valid because your reasoning is valid, calling it a vicious circle. Now, what the point is they're kind of playing another bit of a word game. You've already defined why your reasoning is valid. You have the foundation, and you have the fact that your senses have led to reasoning, and your reasoning have led to, been addressed by experience, and the experience that, the fact that you're not in a psych ward, and that you're able to communicate with people, and you haven't killed yourself by, confusing a car with a marshmallow or something. That is the proof. That is the validation to show that it's valid. But they're going to try and dumb it down and kind of give you a little bit of, I guess it would be a straw man. But you have your foundation. You have your validation. Just stick with that. And then they really can't argue with that. You're just going to end up just saying the same crap over and over again. But don't let them get away with straw manning. Of course, about 41 minutes in, we start talking about how presuppositionalism is circular. However, presups tend to defend themselves by calling it virtuously circular and not viciously circular. Where the hell did that come from? I don't know. But they claim this by saying that when you appeal to an ultimate authority, then it becomes virtuously circular. Now, Rob Hughes basically brings up the conversation, like, what if you are walking along and all of a sudden you see something that says, don't walk here, don't stand here. And you ask somebody and say, hey, why can't I stand here? And he says, well, the police say so. And you're like, oh, okay, whatever, that's fine. If it's the police are saying so, then obviously it's true. Then, there's a good reason for it. Now, Alex rightly points out, well, the only reason why that our analogy works is because we understand the police. We accept the police as being, having jurisdiction. And, if the police are telling you something, then, yeah, there's obviously a reason for it. If you were to say, the Gibbleflops, at least what he said don't stand there. And you'd be like, well, who the fuck is the Gibbleflops? I don't give a flop. It just made a Pun. Okay. And, so then that's the whole point that we're trying to make here is, well, I don't see how God is an authority. I don't even see him as existing, much less being an authority. And that's probably your best thing that you can bring up at that point is just saying, look, well, okay, show that he exists first and show that he's an authority, and then and then they'll become virtuously circular, and I'll even let you have that. But until they do that. So right about 45 minutes in, Alex goes on the attack and asks Rob, how are you appealing to this authority? And eventually, the guy points out that he had to use his reasoning and senses to come to this knowledge, which is kind of circular. And, it's funny that the Presup is allowed to use reasoning and the senses to come to that knowledge that God supposedly beamed down to them, but that we can't use. He asked them, well, where do you get your revelation from? And the first thing they talk about before they get separated is general revelation and special revelation. General revelation is, just basically just everything creation and everything we see around us. So Alex asked, where do you see this? Where did you perceive this revelation? And he replies, reason and senses. And once again, viciously circular. Now, he didn't talk about special revelation, but if you want to talk about special revelation, we're talking about the scripture and, the special just revelation that comes from God. In previous discussions, Alex and other people and I believe R and Ra have talked about, well, how do you deal with, competing revelations? If two different people have different revelations, how do you respond to that? How do we know who is correct? And from what I've seen, they have to go to the Bible. And then, of course, once again, you ask, well, how do you know which is correct? A special revelation? What about the people that, came, as the Bible was being written, the people that wrote the Bible? How do they know that they was accurate? They didn't have any other, they couldn't go to the Bible. They had to go to, they would have to use special revelation from God. Well, how could they know that it was actually, accurate and really came from God and true? They can't. And from what I've seen, I have not really ever seen a really good response or answer to that. So basically, when it comes down to it, it's still circular. Well, that's about it, folks. The discussion/debate went on for about another 30 minutes, and they talked about some other things. Again, I'm linking the channel down below, so please go watch it, enjoy it. And now that you understand the basis for this, maybe you can go listen to this and understand it even better and apply it a little bit better. But I hope this was helpful to those of you that have never heard of Primacy of Existence and may have not even heard Alex talk about this, and you maybe not understand it that well, because I figure I can't be the only one that wasn't paying attention. So this is the Atheist Chef signing off. Peace. Because this guy is another cyclone. But not the best cyclone. Of course, Psy is much better at this, but thankfully, being that this guy was, he's not that good at the Presup argument, Alex got to, I guess, have to dumb it down for him. A lot of his points, he had to dumb it down for him, which means I got to figure out what you're talking about, because when you hear, I had to put up with pretty much all of them, I think. And in there, so since they can't beat Alex Botten, they're going on to us lesser beings that don't really know these things. And many of these have never really heard these kind of responses, and they're hearing just a few minutes of Sci-10. They're kind of like G-Man. They hear a few phrases and like, oh, I can remember this, I'll put this in the argument. Well, these things we're going to try and bring up tonight, I would have to say when it comes to the Cyclones, or at least the noobs, you can shut them down really, really fast. As far as the nuances go of like the higher ranks of Presup people beyond Sci-10, well, I don't know, because I don't ever mess with those. But these right here, these should be really your main talking points and main things to look out for. Early on in the debate, Rob Hughes, tells why he's a presuppositionalist. Basically, he says, should we use evidence, or do we just expose to the person the... How's it going, YouTube? Atheist Chef here. Now, I just recently watched a video. Alex Botten did a debate with a presuppositionalist, presuppositionalist guy, Rob Hughes. I'm going to link down below what the whole debate. But I really wanted to really get to the highlighted points, the points that are really, really interesting. Because two British people talking, they just sound smarter just when they open their mouths. So Alex is already smart, but then he's British, so like a lot of things go over my head because I'm American and that's just how we work. But thankfully, he had to repeat himself like 7 times, so it was able to sink into my thick skull. Now, the reason why I wanted to cover this is because there's a lot of cyclones out there, and many of them are dreadfully terrible, and Alex is